By the time they laced Rosalind Duskwalker into the ceremonial silk, she could no longer feel her fingers. The gown was white for purity, silver for alliance, and cut so tightly beneath her ribs that every breath scraped. Beneath its embroidered moon phases, a second softer curve pressed against the boning, small still, but unmistakable to anyone who knew where to look. So the seamstress had looked once, gone pale, and stitched an extra panel with shaking hands. No one had thanked her. "Stand straight," Lady Merowyn hissed, jerking Rosalind's shoulders back hard enough to make her vision spark. "You are not a widow today, you are a treaty." Rosalind kept her eyes on the mirror because if she looked at the older woman, she might bare her teeth. In the glass, she looked like a ghost painted into nobility. Ash-blonde hair braided with moonstone pins, eyes too hollow, lips drained. 3 months ago, those same lips had laughed into her mate's throat while dawn broke over the eastern ridge. 3 months ago, Alden had kissed the pulse in her wrist and promised they would tell the council about the pup together, after the spring hunt, after politics settled. 3 nights later, moon-masked assassins had pinned him against a birch and gutted him before her wolves could reach the clearing. The coalition had sent condolences, a sealed cask of winter wine, and 20 guards for her protection. Now half of them stood outside the chapel doors with hands on sword hilts. A knock sounded. Lord Caro entered without waiting for invitation, smelling of amber oil and ambition. He was the coalition's chosen groom, 40, broad, handsome in a polished way that made Rosalind think of knife blades left out for display. His gaze slid over her stomach, lingered one beat too long, then rose to her face. "You are pale," he said, smiling as though concerned. "But perhaps that reads as devotion." Rosalind said nothing. Caro stepped closer, close enough she could see the faint silver scar across his chin. "You understand what happens if you refuse at the altar, yes?" Merowyn answered for her. "Her border villages lose winter grain rights and guard support. Her dead mate's house is dissolved. Her title reverts to the coalition." Caro's smile widened. "And grief can make a woman irrational. We would hate for rumors to suggest your condition clouded your judgment. Condition, as if the child under her heart were an illness." Rosalind met his eyes at last. "My condition has a name." He shrugged. "Not for long, if the council decides differently." Merowyn pinched Rosalind's arm through silk, sharp and punishing. "Enough. You will do what duty requires." Duty. They used that word like a choke chain. The chapel bells began to toll, low, bronze strikes that rolled through stone corridors and into bone. Outside, horns answered from the courtyard. Somewhere beyond those walls, Pax drank and cheered and pretended this wedding meant stability instead of surrender. Rosalind let them lead her down the corridor lit with tallow candles and winter roses. Every step jarred her spine. Her wolf paced beneath her skin, restless, furious, caged. At the chapel threshold she paused. Incense coiled thick in the air, juniper, myrrh, old blood. The high altar had been built from black basalt veined with moonstone, and above it hung the old sigil, 3 wolves circling a single crown. She used to find it beautiful. Tonight it looked like a trap closing. Rows of nobles turned as she entered. Some lowered their eyes, ashamed. Most did not bother. "Poor thing," someone whispered too loudly. "Should have accepted the first proposal before she started showing. Better this than letting her whelp a rival line in hiding." Rosalind's jaw locked, her palm flattened over her lower belly for the briefest second before she forced her hand away. At the altar, High Priest Odrin waited in crimson robes, a ceremonial blade resting across his open palms. Caro took his place beside her and offered his arm. She ignored it. Odrin's voice boomed under the vaulted ceiling. "We gather to bind blood to blood, pack to pack, wound to healing." Healing. Alden's blood had soaked into spring leaves while coalition envoys argued jurisdiction over the body. Odrin continued through the old vows while acolytes lit the altar brazier. The fire burned blue-white with iron salts, meant to sanctify oath blood. Rosalind felt heat on her face and nausea rise in her throat. When Odrin asked who gave this widow to the coalition, Merowyn stepped forward. "I do," she said, clear as a bell. "For the safety of our borders and the correction of past losses." Past losses, as if Alden were an accounting error. Rosalind's nails dug crescents into her palms. Her wolf snarled inside her chest. For one wild beat, she imagined lunging for Odrin's blade and carving a path through silk and clergy and lies. Instead, she stood still, while Caro took her hand in both of his and squeezed until her knuckles popped. "Try not to tremble," he murmured without moving his lips. "It reads as guilt." The priest raised the oath blade. "By blood freely given." Freely. Rosalind almost laughed. It came out as a broken breath. A movement at the edge of the altar caught her eye. One of the honor guard shifting stance, gauntlet flashing in firelight. A ring at his index finger, carved from pale bone. Not antler, not ivory. Wolf phalanx, polished smooth, etched with a crescent slash. Her lungs stopped. She had seen that ring once before, in moonlight under birch trees, as a masked killer wiped Alden's blood from his knife. The guard's mask now was ceremonial, silver filigree instead of black lacquer, but his shoulders, the old limp in his left leg, the ring. Gods, the ring. He saw her notice. His mouth curved beneath the mask. Not surprise, recognition, and promise. Rosalind understood in one cold, perfect instant. The men who butchered her mate now stood in wedding colors. They had not failed to save Alden. They had been paid to kill him. And if she swore herself tonight, she and her child would not survive the feast. Audrin held out the blade. "Lady Rosalind, offer your palm." Caro's grip tightened. "Do it." Her pulse hammered so hard she could hear it over the bells. Around her, faces blurred into a ring of expectant mouths. Her wolf lunged against her ribs. The pup kicked once, hard, defiant, like a spark striking tinder. Rosalind took the blade and slashed her own palm open from heel to lifeline. Gasps ripped through the chapel. Blood welled bright and immediate. Before Odrin could seize her wrist, she drove her bleeding hand straight through the altar flame. Fire roared, hissing where blood hit sanctified salts. The blue-white blaze flared violent green, then shattered into black smoke. The oath fire died with a sound like a choking scream. "No!" Odrin staggered back. "You broke consecration!" "By witness and flame!" Rosalind shouted, voice cracking into something feral. "I reject this binding." Caro lunged for her. She pivoted, silk tearing at her hip, and rammed her elbow into his throat. He went down gagging. "Seize her!" Merowyn screamed. "Before she shifts!" Guards surged. The Wolfbone assassin reached first, hand outstretched. Rosalind grabbed a brass candelabrum and hurled it into his face. Wax and fire exploded. He cursed, stumbling blind. She ran, not toward the doors, they were already closing, but toward the side transept and its narrow stair to the musician's balcony. Her skirts tangled around her legs. She ripped them at the seam and kept climbing. Behind her came pounding boots, shouted orders, the scrape of drawn steel. "Alive!" Caro's voice rasped below. "The widow alive!" Alive for now, dead later. At the balcony rail, Rosalind looked down into 30 feet of empty nave and packed pews. Too far in silk, too far with a sprained ankle waiting to happen, too far with a child inside her. The stair door burst open behind her. The assassin stepped through smoke, ring gleaming, knife already in hand. "Don't jump," he said almost kindly. "It'll be faster my way." Rosalind climbed onto the rail. "Tell Vivienne," she said, blood dripping from her palm to the stone below. She should have finished me in the birches. His eyes narrowed. Then Rosalind pushed off into open air. For one suspended heartbeat she was weightless, falling through incense and bell thunder. She hit a draped banner, tore through linen, slammed shoulder first into a lower chandelier chain, and crashed onto the edge of a pew hard enough to split wood and breath together. Agony lit up her left ankle. Voices shrieked. Someone grabbed for her cloak and got only fabric. She rolled, crawled, staggered to her feet, and ran down the side aisle through raining glass as a crossbow bolt punched into the pillar where her head had been. Outside, the night was sleet and torchlight. She fled through the palace gardens, over frozen hedges, through the servants' quarter where laundry lines whipped her face. A hound bayed. Another answered. Behind, alarm horns shifted to pursuit cadence. 3 short, 1 long. She tore off moonstone pins to lighten her braid. She ripped her wedding veil and wrapped it around her bleeding palm. At the outer wall she found a drainage culvert half choked with ice, dropped to her knees in mud, and dragged herself through on elbows while stones scraped silk from her back. By the time she crawled out into the ravine beyond, her body shook so hard she could barely stand. She did not stop. She followed the river south all night, keeping to reed beds and alder shadows. Once, riders passed on the ridge with lanterns swinging and wolf forms pacing between horses. Twice, she heard gunfire in the far dark, the flat crack of human weapons from the mining roads. Dawn bled gray over slag hills and black pines, and with it came the first sign nailed to a border post, wanted under coalition law. Rosalind Duskwalker apprehend alive. Bounty claimable. Below, in newer ink, someone had scrawled, Alpha King tracking, stand clear, Sebastian Blackwood. The name hit like another bruise. She had never met him, only heard stories told around winter fires. The king with a scar down half his face, the wolf who broke sieges, the ruler who bowed to no council bride and took no orders from silver-tongued nobles. Some called him protector. Some called him beast. All said he could scent fear at a mile. Rosalind pulled her hood lower and limped toward Bramblegate anyway, because there was nowhere else left. By mid-morning, sleet became rain, needling and cold. Bramblegate rose from the valley in tiers of timber and soot-streaked stone, mine lifts clanking against the hillside like iron insects. Smoke from smelters thickened the air. Human voices outnumbered wolf scents 2 to 1. Here, old hatred had been hammered into commerce. Tanning racks lined alleys, and in 1 yard she saw pelts stretched on frames that made her stomach lurch before she looked away. A man at the gate eyed her torn silk and blood-crusted hand. "You lost, lady?" "Widow," she said hoarsely. "Looking for work." He snorted. "Try not to howl at the moon while you do it." Inside the town, rumor moved faster than rainwater. 2 miners whispered over a handbill with her name. A butcher's apprentice pointed at her boots and frowned, like he recognized crestwork beneath the mud. She ducked into narrower lanes, head down, shoulder throbbing, ankle on fire. By dusk, she was shaking from hunger and pain, and the pup had gone quiet in a way that terrified her more than pursuit. Then shouting cracked through the rain ahead. "Drop it, mongrel!" Rosalind flattened against a brick wall at the mouth of an alley. 3 human hunters had a man boxed in near stacked crates, crossbows up, silver mesh net ready. Their quarry wore a dark travel hood soaked through, broad shoulders loose as if he were merely inconvenienced. "Bounty says alive if possible," one hunter muttered. "Possible just changed," said another, and fired. What happened next was so fast Rosalind almost missed it. The hooded man stepped offline. The bolt split rain where his throat had been. He caught the net pole with one hand, twisted, and used the hunter's own momentum to slam him into a barrel. The second hunter lunged with a silver knife. The stranger disarmed him with a wrist break clean enough to be merciful, then kicked the blade under a cart. The third raised his crossbow point blank. The hooded man drove his forearm up, took the shot into his bracer, and swept the man's legs without ever striking his head. No killing blows, no wasted motion, controlled violence like a king's decree. Rain ran off his hood as he turned, and Rosalind saw the scar, pale and jagged from brow to jaw, and eyes like molten gold in stormlight. Cedar smoke, storm steel. Power that made her wolf rear up and press forward at once. The bond hit her like lightning through the spine. Her knees buckled, breath vanished. Somewhere deep the pup kicked, sudden and fierce. The man froze as if an unseen spear had pierced him. His head snapped toward her. Gold eyes widened, then blazed. He took one step, stopped himself, and went down to one knee in the rain, hand braced on cobblestone as though the earth had tilted beneath him. "Mine," he rasped, voice wrecked with shock. Sebastian Blackwood lifted his gaze to hers, rain and hunger and something raw between them, and forced himself, visibly, painfully, to lean back instead of reaching for her. The hunters on the cobbles groaned and cursed, clutching wrists and ribs, but none of them bled out. None of them even had broken throats. Sebastian Blackwood stayed on one knee in the rain like a warrior before an altar, chest heaving once, twice, as if mastering an urge that would devour them both if he let it loose. Rosalind's wolf slammed against her skin so hard her teeth ached. Mate. The word did not arrive as language. It arrived as heat, flooding up her spine, spilling into her limbs, finding every place she was cold and making it burn. Her pulse, frantic and ragged moments ago, lurched into a new rhythm that wasn't hers alone. She could feel him in it, like a second heartbeat knocking against her own. "No," she whispered, though she did not know which horror she was refusing. Sebastian's nostrils flared. Rain tracked down the scar that split his face, caught on his jaw, fell in silver drops to the stone. His gaze flicked once to her blood-wrapped hand, once to the way she favored her left foot, then back to her eyes. He did not look away again. The alley narrowed around them. Wet brick, rotting straw, metal and smoke from distant smelters. Under it all, his scent. Cedar ash, cold iron, storm rolling over pine ridges. It hit her with dizzying familiarity, as if some part of her had waited for it across lifetimes and wanted to crawl toward it on hands and knees. And then, sharp as a knife under silk, Alden's laugh in spring grass, Alden's blood on birch roots. Her stomach clenched. The pup kicked again, hard enough to bend her forward with a choked breath. Sebastian twitched as if he felt that too. "Are you hurt?" he asked, voice low, rough from restraint. Of all the things he could have said, mine again. "Come here, Neil." He asked that. Rosalind scraped herself upright from the wall, every instinct screaming, "Run. Run now. Stay back." A flicker crossed his face. Not anger. Pain. "I will," he said immediately, and rose in a single controlled motion, keeping distance. "No one touches you unless you allow it. Not me. Not anyone." One of the hunters spat bloody rainwater near his boot. "Blackwood," he wheezed. "You can't—" Sebastian didn't even turn his head. "Pick up your men and leave this lane." There was no shout in it, no theatrics, but command rolled out of him anyway. Old, bone-deep dominance that made even Rosalind's wolf lower her ears. The hunter blanched, grabbed his fallen companion, and staggered away. The others followed, limping, muttering about cursed wolves and broken bounties. When they were gone, only rain remained. Rosalind backed toward the alley mouth, hand braced on slick brick. "You're tracking me." "Yes." The blunt honesty knocked her off balance more than denial would have. "For the coalition?" she demanded. His mouth went hard. "I don't hunt pregnant widows for men like Caro." "You know Caro." "I know the scent of cowardice dressed as law." His eyes flashed gold, then steadied. And I know what I smelled at your chapel ruins this morning: wolfsbane ash, silver oil, mask lacquer, a beat, assassin craft. Cold slid down her spine despite the bond heat. You were there. After you jumped. His jaw flexed. I was too late. Something in the way he said it, like failure was a wound, personal and fresh, made her throat tighten against her will. She hated that. She hated the pull that kept tugging her gaze back to his mouth, his hands, the breadth of him contained with deliberate care. Hated the way her wolf leaned toward him while her mind screamed traitor, king, danger. Hated the hot, humiliating awareness that beneath fear and grief, desire had lit like kindling and would not be stomped out. Alden is dead, she thought wildly. You don't get to want anything. I don't belong to you, she said, voice shaking with fury as much as rain cold. Sebastian inclined his head once. Agreed. The answer was so unexpected she just stared. His fingers curled, then opened at his side, a visible fight not to reach for her. The bond says what it says, but I am not a chain, Rosalind. She flinched at her name on his tongue. He noticed and took one step back. You're bleeding through your wrap, he said, glancing at her palm. And your ankle is swelling. There's an apothecary 2 streets over with a cellar entrance no one uses after dark. Let me get you there. Then I leave, if you want me gone. You expect me to trust you because you disarmed 3 men prettily? No. A humorless breath. I expect you not to collapse in a gutter because pride tastes better than survival. Rain intensified, hammering the alley hard enough to blur edges. Somewhere close, voices rose. Saw her go this way. And the clatter of boots over plank walkways. Rosalind's wolf growled. Pursuit. Sebastian heard it too. He lifted his hands, empty. Palms out. Your choice. Now. For 1 heartbeat. 2. They locked in place. Eyes pinned. In his she saw hunger held on a knife edge. Yes, but also patience dragged raw, and a strange, impossible reverence that made her chest hurt. She swallowed rain. Show me the cellar. The apothecary smelled of dried nettle and stale vinegar, shutters barred and front room abandoned for the storm. Sebastian led her through a side passage and down narrow steps into a low cellar lit by 1 tallow candle jammed in a cracked saucer. Shelves bowed with old jars, comfrey, feverfew, willow bark gone dusty with disuse. A coal stove crouched dead in the corner. Rosalind made it 3 steps before her ankle gave. She caught herself on a crate with a hiss. Sebastian was instantly there and stopped short, kneeling at arm's length instead of touching. May I look? He asked. She stared down at him, water dripping from her braid, silk shredded and mud-streaked around her calves. Kings in stories took. They did not ask. Why? She said. Because suspicion still had teeth. His expression did not shift. Because pain makes everything worse. Because your pup is stressed. Because I would rather earn 1 inch than steal a mile. Her throat worked. You can smell the pup. Yes. Silence stretched. Above them, wind rattled loose shutters. Finally, she lowered herself onto an overturned grain sack and held out her injured leg with all the grace of surrendering a weapon. Look. Thank you. He moved with careful economy, cutting away the torn edge of her stocking with a small boot knife, never touching skin until she nodded. The ankle was already ballooning, mottled purple where she had landed from the balcony fall. Sprain, he murmured, not broken. He stripped off his cloak, folded it into a pad, and set her heel atop it. Then he crossed to a water barrel, found it nearly empty, and tilted the last inches into a dented kettle. No firewood dry enough to catch, he considered, then held the kettle over the candle flame and cupped his hands around it, coaxing heat with a controlled exhale that smelled faintly of wolf fire and cedar. It took too long. He did it anyway. Rosalind watched Warrior calloused fingers test the warmth before he brought the kettle back. "Too hot, tell me," he said. The cloth touched her swollen skin. Relief and sting flared together. She clenched her jaw. He waited. "It's fine," she managed. He cleaned her palm next, unwinding the ruined veil wrap inch by inch. The altar slash looked angry, but clean. "You drove this through sanctified flame," he said softly, not admiration, not rebuke. Just fact, wrapped in awe. "I needed the right dead." "You killed it thoroughly." A broken laugh escaped her before she could stop it. She hated how quickly he caught that sound, how the hard line of his shoulders eased by a fraction, as if he'd been holding breath for years. From a chest against the wall he found linen strips, likely left for poultices, and fashioned a compression wrap for her ankle. His hands were huge, scar-crossed, absurdly gentle as he laced her boot back around the bandage, knotting it so it would not rub. He never crowded her knees with his body. He kept that careful arm's length unless she shifted closer herself. When a tremor ran through her fingers anyway, he glanced up. "You're cold? Or afraid?" "Both." He nodded once, accepting it like weather. Then, under his breath, he began to hum. The tune was old, older than courts, older than titles, a nursery cadence mothers used to settle pups through thunder nights. Rosalind had not heard it since she was small enough to sleep in the crook of her mother's arm. Her chest tightened painfully. "You know that song," she whispered. "My sister used to bite anyone who stopped singing before she slept." For the first time, a ghost of something almost warm touched his mouth. "I learned endurance early." The hum steadied the air between them. Her breathing matched it before she realized. The pup inside her rolled, then went still in that deep, peaceful way that meant calm instead of fear. When Sebastian finished the wraps, he set both hands on his own thighs and looked at the floor, giving her room to decide next words. "You can take the cot," he said. "I'll keep the stair." "You don't sleep?" "Lightly." She almost asked who taught a king to sleep like prey, but exhaustion cracked through her before curiosity could. She lay on the narrow cot in damp clothes, too tired to remove boots, eyes fixed on low beams while storm water ticked down the walls. Somewhere in the night she dreamed birch trees and moon masks, and Alden calling her name from a place she could not reach. She came awake with a strangled cry, half risen, claws threatening to break skin. "Alden." The cellar was dim blue with pre-dawn seeping through cracks. Sebastian stood near the foot of the cot, not close, not looming. A steaming cup rested on the crate beside her hand. Mint tea. Fresh, somehow. He did not ask what she'd seen, did not flinch at the dead mate's name. "You owe me nothing tonight, Rosalind," he said quietly. Then he stepped back to the stairs and kept watch while she shook and drank and tried not to cry. By late morning, Bramblegate's market was a churn of boots, mule carts, and wet canvas awnings snapping in wind. Sebastian had insisted on moving before anyone traced them to the apothecary. Rosalind had insisted she could walk. Both statements were true, and both were lies. Her ankle held if she pretended not to feel it. They kept to the edge of the square, past fishmongers and ore brokers shouting rates over rain. Human scents everywhere. Sweat, coal, tanned leather, gun oil. Too many eyes. Rosalind pulled her hood lower and reached for a stall post as dizziness washed through her. The proprietor, a thin human widow with iron-gray braid, frowned at her pale face but said nothing. Then a voice cracked across the square like a whip. "There!" A broad-shouldered man in hunter-captain leathers pushed through the crowd, silver badge pinned at his collar. 2 deputies flanked him with crossbows already half raised. Behind them, more guild hunters spread, circling. The captain lifted a handbill, rain softened but readable even from where she stood. her own name above the coalition seal. "Rosalind Duskwalker," he called. "By posted bounty and emergency order, you are taken for transport in irons." People turned. Murmurs rippled. Is that her? Thought she'd be bigger. Pregnant. Gods. The captain's lip curled. Any citizen assisting lawful capture receives a quarter share. Any citizen obstructing forfeits trade license for treason harboring. Move clear. A deputy's gaze dropped deliberately to Rosalind's belly under the cloak. He smirked. Careful with the she-wolf traitor. Bounty says alive, not comfortable. Rage flashed white behind her eyes. She bared teeth before she could stop herself. Sebastian stepped between her and the line of weapons so smoothly she barely saw him move. No, he said. The single syllable hit like a slammed gate. The captain squinted. Recognition landed, and with it a greedy kind of fear. Well, well, Blackwood himself. Save us paperwork, Your Majesty. Hand her over and we all pretend this feral episode never happened. Feral episode. Rosalind remembered the border post graffiti, the rumor already spreading like rot. Sebastian did not look back at her. Stand behind me, he said softly. I don't need. A crossbow twanged. Instinct yanked her sideways, but not fast enough. The bolt was aimed low, viciously true toward the curve of her abdomen. Sebastian moved faster. He turned into the line, taking the bolt through the shoulder with a thick, sick sound that made 3 people scream. Blood darkened his coat instantly. He did not stagger. Gold flooded his eyes full bright as his wolf surged under skin, voice dropping into something that vibrated market stalls and marrow alike. She is under my blood law. The command rolled outward in a pressure wave. Wolves in the crowd froze mid-step, heads bowing before their minds caught up. Even humans flinched, hands flying to ears, instinctively yielding ground to an alpha note older than speech. The captain went ash pale. You can't invoke. This is human jurisdiction. Sebastian snapped the bolt shaft, pulled the head through clean in one brutal motion, and tossed it at the man's boots. Then hear it in human terms. Touch her again, and I answer challenge under King's Right and Guild Charter. Publicly. With witnesses. Silence rang. A miner near the weigh scales muttered, He said witnesses. A fishwife shouted, Aye, we heard. The captain's jaw worked. He had expected a snatch in chaos, not law dragged into daylight. Sebastian turned slightly, enough that Rosalind could see the blood soaking down his sleeve, and his voice softened only for her. Are you hit? She shook her head, unable to speak past the thundering in her ears. He nodded once, then addressed the market at large. Any property damaged in this clash will be repaid now. He reached inside his coat with his uninjured hand, drew out a leather purse heavy with stamped royals, and tossed it to the gray-braided widow whose stall had splintered when hunters rushed past. Apples and tin cups lay smashed at her feet. For your losses, he said. Count it in front of them. The widow caught the purse, weighed it, eyes widening. This is triple. Then replace your roof before winter. People stared. Hunters did not pay widows, kings least of all. Sebastian swept his gaze over the ring of merchants, teamsters, and guards, now watching with hawk-bright interest. You all heard my claim. You all saw the attack. If she vanishes, every witness here stands bound to testimony before the Bramblegate Guild Charter Court. Human law, wolf law, woven. The captain swore under his breath, calculating and recalculating in plain sight. Abduction in an alley could be denied. Disappearance after a public protection claim, with half the square as witness, could not. Stand down, he spat to his deputies at last. For now. Crossbows lowered by reluctant inches. Sebastian waited until they backed away before he turned fully to Rosalind. Up close, his face had gone too pale beneath rain and blood loss, but his posture stayed iron straight. You're shaking, he said. So are you. His mouth twitched despite pain. Occupational hazard. She looked at the ruined fabric over his shoulder, the blood he'd spilled without hesitation for a child that wasn't his, for a woman who had done little but snarl at him and accuse. Something shifted, small and terrifying, inside her guard. Not surrender. Not yet. But a crack where light could get in. Rosalind reached out before she could talk herself out of it, caught his uninjured sleeve, and said, low, so only he could hear, "We need to get that wound cleaned, Your Majesty." His eyes softened, storm gold gone quieter. "Sebastian," he said. She held his gaze for a long, unflinching beat while the market roared back to life around them. "Then walk," Rosalind said, not letting go. "And don't you dare fall before I decide whether to trust you." Sebastian didn't argue. He only dipped his head once and let her steer him out of the market crush, his blood marking dark drops through the rain. They ducked behind the tannery row, then cut through a coal yard where steam from wet slag turned the air sour and white. Rosalind kept one hand on his sleeve and one near the knife she'd taken from the apothecary. Every nerve lit for pursuit. Twice she caught shadows pacing them at a distance. Guild watchers pretending to examine wagon wheels. A boy with hunter laces on his boots who vanished when she met his eyes. By the time they slipped into a disused cooper's shed near the North Sluice, Sebastian's breathing had gone tight. "Sit," she ordered. A crooked smile ghosted over his mouth. "Yes, Regent." "I'm not your regent." "Not yet." She shot him a glare that should have had more heat in it. Fear had burned most of that away. She barred the door with a stave, found a lantern, and lit it low. In the amber light his wound looked worse, entry and exit torn through the back of his shoulder, muscle scored but clean of silver. "Lucky. Barely." "Coat off," she said. He peeled it down with a grimace he tried to hide. She saw it anyway. Outside, Bramblegate's bells rang noon. A second later came the staccato beat of a drumline from the main square. Town crier cadence, urgent proclamation. Words carried in fragments through rain and timber gaps. By authority of the Royal Emergency Council. Alpha King Sebastian Blackwood deemed unstable. Abduction of vulnerable widow Rosalind Duskwalker. All loyal subjects render aid to Lady Vivian Silvermane. Rosalind froze with a needle between her fingers. Sebastian went very still. Again the crier shouted, louder this time, accompanied by the scrape of posted bills being nailed to wood. Containment authorized by any licensed hunter guild. Sedation protocols approved. Unborn issue to be secured for dynastic review. Dynastic review. Rosalind's stomach turned to ice. She crossed to a crack in the wall and looked out. At the far end of the lane, men were pinning fresh broadsides over old market notices. The new seal looked royal at a glance, wax blackened with soot, crowned wolf impressed deep. But the motto was wrong, the inner ring too thick, a good forgery made by someone with access and haste. "Vivienne," she whispered. Sebastian's jaw flexed. "Silvermane has been petitioning council for a stability match since my father's pyre cooled. And now she paints you feral and me helpless." He held her gaze. "She paints what gives her votes." Rosalind returned to the crate, hands shaking only once before she forced them steady and threaded the needle. "Who is she to you?" "Nobody I chose." "That's not what I asked." A long pause. Rain rattled the roof. "She was promised influence," he said at last. "Not by me. By men who thought kings can be managed if you put the right bride in their bed and the right signatures under their hand." He looked away, voice flattening. "When I refused, her house lost contracts. Mining rights, guard placements. She called it humiliation. I called it governance." Rosalind knotted thread with her teeth. "And Alden?" His eyes came back to hers, sharp and bleak. "I don't have proof yet. But the wolf bone ring you saw at your wedding? That mark appears in 2 unsolved executions along my eastern border. Both victims opposed Silvermane tariffs. Her pulse thudded in her ears. So she murders opposition, forges decrees, bribes hunters, and wraps it all in law. Bitter. That's why she is dangerous. She doesn't need the strongest blade. She needs witnesses confused long enough. He angled his shoulder toward her. Stitch before it closes wrong. Rosalind cleaned and sutured while he braced his good hand on his knee and said nothing through the pain. Close like this, she could see the half-moons of old scars layered over newer ones, the pale seam of a bite at the base of his throat that had long healed into a crescent. Not mated. A battle wound. When she tied off the last stitch, he exhaled slowly. From outside came another wave of voices, this time not crier formal, but excited. Ugly. Silvermane convoy at West Gate? Royal Guards with hunter badges both. Silver nitrate crates. Saw 'em myself. Whole town's under writ now. Legal killbox, Rosalind thought, though she had never heard the term spoken. Every alley a trap blessed by paperwork. She wrapped his shoulder and stepped back. Sebastian reached into his discarded coat and produced a folded parchment spotted with his blood. He'd taken it from somewhere on the way, and she hadn't noticed. Read. It was a transport license stamped by Bramblegate Hunter Guild, signed in a hand too elegant for a quartermaster. Consignment: 2 silver wire snare assemblies, 6 wolfsbane incense bricks, 1 reinforced restraint crate, 1 gravid specimen harness. Rosalind read the last line twice, mind refusing it. Gravid, she said hoarsely. Sebastian's voice was iron. A live capture gear. The shed seemed to tilt. She wants the pup dead on her terms, Rosalind said. Not in a back alley, in a room full of officials where she can call it tragic necessity. And call you unfaithful besides, he said. If she can discredit your child, she collapses 2 lines at once, yours and mine. Rosalind folded the paper with brutal care and slid it into her bodice. Then she doesn't get the chance. For the first time since the crier began, Sebastian's mouth curved, not in amusement, but in grim recognition of a fighter drawing breath. No, he said. She doesn't. By afternoon, the rain had thinned to mist, which made being watched worse. Bramblegate's streets glittered with puddles and fresh law notices. At each corner stood mixed patrols. Hunter Guild leather beside royal blue beside local watch gray. Neutral no longer. Bought and blended. Rosalind and Sebastian moved through service lanes and roof cuts, changing cloaks twice, never taking the same staircase down they'd used to climb. The mate bond thrummed under her skin like a taut wire. Every time he vanished around a corner, she felt the thread pull. Every time he reappeared, relief struck before pride could bite it back. At a boarded bakery above the river stairs, they paused while a patrol crossed below. Sebastian checked the lane through a knothole and spoke without turning. Your step shortens when you're tired. You're one to lecture. You started limping harder 3 streets ago. Stop scenting my pain. He glanced back, expression dry. Stop having it. Against all reason, a laugh almost escaped her. She swallowed it down and hated the warmth that remained. Pressure mounted with every bell strike. By dusk, new posters carried her likeness, rough-sketched but recognizable, belly exaggerated cruelly. Under Sebastian's face, someone had scrawled Mad King in red mineral chalk. Rumor did the rest. Doors that might have opened in morning now stayed barred. A boy took their coin for bread and threw it from a second-story window rather than hand it over directly. At the old tram trestle, they found the first trap. Thin silver wire strung shin-high between 2 rusted posts, hidden by runoff. Sebastian caught her back with his good arm a breath before she walked into it. You see it now? He murmured. She crouched, following the line to a spring box daubed with hunter marks. That would have sliced a tendon, or slowed you for the darts waiting uphill. She looked where he nodded. In shadow beneath a coal chute, 2 crossbow nests had clear angle on the snare path. Empty at the moment. Not abandoned. Practice run, she said. Mapping routes. His gaze hardened. She's tightening. They doubled back and found incense ash in 2 drain mouths. Wolfsbane mixed with tar, meant to carry low through alleys where wolves might run. Her throat itched, just passing it. Sebastian's pupils thinned, shoulders tensing as if every sound scraped him. Night fell early under cloud. In the bell tower of an unused weighing house, they took temporary shelter while below them the town shifted into curfew. Horn blasts marked district closures. Chain gates dropped across 3 main roads with a clang that echoed like prison bars. Rosalind sat on a crate and rubbed at the ache in her lower back. The pup turned restlessly. Hunger gnawed. Fear lived in her marrow now, but something else sat beside it. A relentless, inconvenient awareness of the male across from her as he cleaned blood from his knife with methodical strokes. He looked up as if feeling her stare. What? She should have said nothing. Instead, when the bond hit, did it feel like drowning? His hand stilled on the blade, like being set on fire and told to stand still. She huffed a breath that was half laugh, half disbelief. Yes. Silence stretched, softer than before, charged. I loved him, she said suddenly, words scraping on the way out. Alden, I still do. Some mornings I wake and forget for 1 second, and then I remember, and it kills me all over again. Her fingers clenched in her skirt. So if this... She tapped her own sternum, where the bond hummed. If this makes me feel anything for you, it feels like betrayal. Sebastian set the knife aside and leaned his forearms on his knees, giving her full attention like an oath. Grief doesn't make room by erasing, he said. It makes room by growing bigger around what remains. His voice roughened. I am not asking you to bury him to choose me. I would never ask that. Her eyes burned. She blinked hard. Below, boots passed. Voices faded. Above, the bell rope creaked in wind. Why didn't you take me when you could? She asked. In the alley. In the cellar. Any of these corners. His smile was brief and without humor. Because I know what it is to be treated as a prize animal with a crown on its head. A beat. And because I have wanted you since rain hit stone yesterday, and wanting is exactly why I keep my hands to myself. The honesty landed like a handprint on her skin. Pressure in her belly tightened suddenly, sharp, then easing. She sucked a breath. Sebastian was beside her in an instant, then caught himself and stopped just short. Pain? Just a cramp. She inhaled through it. He hates stress. He? She almost smiled. I don't know. It feels like a he. May I? He lifted his hand, hovering near her stomach, not touching. Rosalind looked at that hand, scarred, steady despite blood loss, and at the male waiting as if her answer mattered more than oxygen. She nodded. His palm settled warm over the curve of her belly. The bond flared. Not hunger this time, but a deep, resonant note that traveled through both of them. The pup kicked once, directly into his hand. Sebastian made a sound she'd never heard from him. Small, wrecked, wonderstruck. Hello, little wolf, he whispered. Rosalind's walls did not fall. They cracked, mortar crumbling in quiet lines she could no longer pretend weren't there. The first assault came as scent before sound. Wolfsbane smoke, thick and sweet rotten, poured through the tower slats in a sudden wave that made Rosalind cough and her wolf recoil. Beneath it came the metallic tang of silver nitrate and lamp oil. Sebastian was moving before she finished coughing. Up. Roof exit! They climbed the inner ladder as shouts erupted below. Third level clear! Net teams to the stair. By order of Lady Silvermane, surrender the abducted widow. A voice answered from outside, amplified by speaking horn and polished for public hearing. "Rosalind Duskwalker," Vivian called, every syllable carrying. "You are being unlawfully detained by a feral alpha under false bond influence. Come down and I will see you protected." Rosalind reached the roof hatch and kicked it open into night mist. She hauled herself out onto slate, ankle screaming. Sebastian followed, slammed the hatch, and dropped a hook bar through the hasp as fists hammered below. Across the square, torch lines burned in concentric rings. Hunters on rooftops. Royal guards at intersections. Guild wagons blocked alleys with cage carts chained behind them. No random net. A campaign grid. At the center, beneath a crimson canopy by the Guildhall steps, stood Vivian Silvermane. She wore mourning gray cut with royal silver, hair braided in perfect coils, face unveiled to show appropriate concern. One gloved hand held a decree scroll. The other rested on the rim of a reinforced transport crate large enough for a wolf in chains. Beside it sat incense braziers venting wolfsbane smoke, and a rack of silver wire launchers pointed up at the surrounding roofs. She looked up and smiled when she spotted them. Warm, sorrowful, rehearsed. "There you are," she said through the horn. "Sebastian, darling, everyone can see you're wounded and unwell. Let us help you." Sebastian's lip curled. "I'd rather chew glass." The crowd below tittered nervously. Guards tightened ranks. Vivian lifted the scroll. "Emergency Council decree recognizes me as acting stabilizer until the king is restored to reason. Any harm to the widow or her unborn issue will be prosecuted as treason murder." She lowered the horn, then spoke aside to the hunter captain at her elbow, loud enough Rosalind could still hear in the hush. "Alive, remember. Bruised photographs better than blood." The captain nodded once. Rosalind's nails bit her palms. "She wants spectacle." "She wants narrative," Sebastian corrected, scanning escape lines. 3 roof teams east, 2 west. Silver nets primed. She left North Gap narrow on purpose. Funnels to the crate. From below, Vivian raised the horn again. "I know you're frightened, Rosalind. He confuses instinct with destiny. Come to me and I'll ensure your child is examined by neutral healers." Neutral. Like butchers calling themselves surgeons. A twang snapped the air. A silver wire net launched, missing them by inches and tangling on a chimney stack where it hissed and smoked. Warning shot. Sebastian stepped in front of Rosalind, shoulders squared despite the fresh blood seeping through his bandage. "We can jump to the tannery roof," he said quickly. "Then the drainage run. Through wolfsbane lanes and wire grids? With my ankle?" She shook her head. "She expects flight." "Better than capture?" Another launcher cracked. This net clipped the roof edge near Rosalind's boot. Silver strands spat sparks where they struck slate. Below, Vivian's voice sharpened, patience thinning. "Last mercy, cousin. Send her down and I will testify you cooperated." Cousin. The word landed like rot. Family wearing a smile while setting snares. Sebastian's eyes never left the ring of shooters. "If I go alone," he said under his breath, "she'll shift focus. We might buy you a corridor." Rosalind whipped toward him. "No." "Rosalind." I said no. His jaw locked. "This is math, not martyrdom. Your math gets you caged and me hunted anyway." Below, horns blared 3 short, 1 long, the same pursuit cadence from her wedding night. Teams began to climb adjacent ladders. Torchlight multiplied. Sebastian looked at her then, really looked, and whatever he saw made something hard settle in his face. Decision. Terrible and calm. "If they breach this roof," he said, voice low and final, "I surrender at the rail. I invoke King's Person exchange for your safe passage under witness." The world narrowed to that sentence, to smoke in her lungs and iron in her mouth. Ladder hooks clanged against slate on both sides. Vivian smiled up through drifting wolfsbane, and the first boarding hand appeared over the roof line. The first hunter hauled himself over the roof edge with a silver net looped across his back and a club at his belt. Rosalind didn't think. She kicked his wrist with her good heel. He yelped and dropped, crashing into the men below. Someone screamed, "She's on the line!" And 3 crossbows snapped up at once. "Down!" Sebastian barked, dragging her behind a chimney as bolts shattered slate where her head had been. The roof became noise and motion, hooks clanging, nets hissing open, torchlight strobing through wolfsbane smoke. On the far edge, a royal guard in silvermane colors gained footing and lunged. Sebastian met him with a shoulder check that sent both men skidding. He fought with one arm half useless and still moved like controlled thunder, disarming, redirecting, never wasting breath on fear. "Sebastian!" Vivian called through her horn, voice sharpened to steel. "Stand down now, or I authorize suppression." He spat blood over the eaves and laughed once, feral and joyless. "You always did like pretty words for ugly acts." A launcher cracked. Silver wire shot across the roof and wrapped the chimney where Rosalind crouched. The strands smoked, biting stone. One brushed her sleeve and burned through the wool in a stinging line across her forearm. Peril turned immediate and personal. Not policy, not rumor. Trap, burn, cage. She saw it all at once then, not just tonight's ring of hunters, but the chapel, the Wolfbone ring, Alden's blood under birch roots, the forged decree, the transport crate below with gravid specimen harness written like inventory. Vivian did not want a rival. She wanted Rosalind erased with paperwork and a tragic face. Sebastian slammed another boarder flat and back toward her, chest heaving. "When I move, go north. Drainage run, then rail cut. Do not stop for me." "No." Rosalind's voice came out low and absolute. "Rosalind." She grabbed his jaw, making him look at her. "If you surrender, she cages you. If I run, she hunts me. This does not end in an alley." Another hook bit the roof. Hunters rose on both flanks. His eyes flashed, furious and afraid for her in a way that hit her harder than any bolt. "Then tell me your move." She glanced down. Vivian stood near the Guildhall steps, beneath the crimson canopy. One hand on decree scroll, one hand near a brass lever box bolted discreetly to the witness rail. Noted. Rosalind's mind snapped into the old tactical rhythm Alden had taught her on border patrol. Terrain, choke points, witnesses, leverage. "Guildhall archives," she said. "Original contracts, bounty ledgers, transport licenses." She forged public seals, but bribes leave ink trails. I saw a wrong motto on her decree. If we drag this into testimony under human charter, she can't alpha command half the town into silence. Sebastian's brows knit. The archives are inside her perimeter. So is the iron alarm. Understanding hid his face like dawn through storm. 3 hunters surged over the west edge together. Sebastian turned, slammed one with his forearm, ducked a club, and called over his shoulder, "There's a maintenance catwalk under this roofline, drops behind the assay office, locked gate." Rosalind bared her teeth. "I have a knife." He almost smiled despite the blood on his mouth. "You have 10. He caught her wrist before she moved, fingers warm and shaking with restraint. "If you do this, they will aim for your belly first." "They already are." A beat, rain hissing on hot silver wire. Then he nodded, King and Wolf both yielding to her choice. "I hold the roof," he said. "I draw eyes. You ring the town." Rosalind squeezed his hand once, agreement, promise, maybe prayer, and sprinted low along the smoke side while Sebastian roared challenge and drove straight into the densest cluster of boarders. Every head snapped to him. Good. She found the catwalk grate half hidden under a slate lip, stabbed her knife into the rusted lock, and levered until metal shrieked. A bolt clipped stone by her knee. She dropped through the hatch into blackness, landed hard on iron rungs, and slid the grate closed over her head as boots thundered past above. Below, the catwalk swayed over the Guildhall service court. Lanterns swung. Two clerks huddled by a coal bin, listening to roof fight noise with pale faces. Rosalind dropped the last 6 feet, hit badly on her sprained ankle, bit back a cry, and limped into shadow. One clerk spotted her torn wedding silk under the borrowed cloak and gasped. Gods, it's her. Where are your contract ledgers? Rosalind hissed. Now. The man swallowed, eyes flicking toward the main square where Vivian's voice still boomed through horn. Madame Silvermane ordered all sealed. Where? Archive vault, lower corridor. Iron door with assay stamps. Rosalind shoved 2 silver royals into his hand. You never saw me? He stared at the coins like they were burning. Then he pointed with 2 trembling fingers. Past scales. Left at ore maps. She ran. The lower corridor smelled of ink, damp paper, and old metal. She found the iron door exactly where he said, barred with a guild lock and a wax strip stamped Hunter Captain Joran Vale, same man from the market. She cut the wax, picked the lock by feel while her hands shook. Inside, shelves rose floor to ceiling, ledgers packed tight by year and kill code. Bramblegate had quantified everything: pelts, bullets, bounties, bodies. Rosalind moved fast, scanning spines by lantern light. Transport licenses, emergency private security contracts, noble houses, special commissions, mask procurement, mask procurement. Her pulse jumped. She yanked the ledger free, flipped pages, names coded, payments staggered through shell accounts. And there, repeated in the margin as execution confirmation, a crescent slash mark beside a Wolfbone insignia stamp no honest guild used. Same mark from the ring in her chapel. She ripped that page, then 3 more tying payments to dates. One the night Alden died. One the week before her forced wedding. One yesterday, marked gravid retrieval. Next shelf, council courier receipts. She found Vivian Silvermane's private seal impression on 6 sealed disbursements routed through Caro's coalition office. Caro. So that was his smile at the mirror. He already knew what she carried and who paid to control it. She grabbed everything: contracts, receipts, manifest copies, stuffed them into a satchel, and turned to go. A guard stepped into the doorway, moon mask tucked at his belt, wolfbone ring pale on his finger. The chapel assassin. Well, he said softly. Little widow. Rosalind didn't freeze this time. She hurled the lantern at his face. He flinched, cursing as oil fire splashed his coat. She slammed the iron door into his knee, heard it crack, then drove her shoulder through the gap and ran while he screamed for pursuit. Up the corridor, she veered not for the alley but for the Guild Forge Annex, where apprentices stamped assay pins by size. A rack of marked decoy pins sat cooling in sand, bright brass, red-dipped heads for training levers. She grabbed one and sprinted for the square. Bramblegate's iron alarm bell hung above the central weighbridge, a massive rust-dark clapper used for mine cave-ins, floods, and riot summons. No one rang it for politics. Rosalind climbed the weighbridge stairs 2 at a time, ankle on fire, lungs tearing. "Stop her!" someone shouted. She reached the bell rope first. The sound that exploded over town was not elegant. It was iron on iron, catastrophe-made voice. 1 strike, 2, 3. Windows opened. Patrols halted. Miners poured from bunkhouses, merchants from shuttered stalls, guards from post doors. Humans and wolves alike turned toward the square, because in Bramblegate the iron alarm meant every citizen witnessed. No exceptions. Vivian's smile faltered as the crowd swelled beyond her controlled perimeter. Rosalind strode to the rail above the scales, rain plastering hair to her face, and threw back her cloak with deliberate hands so everyone could see the curve of her pregnancy. "I invoke widow's right," she shouted. Her voice cracked once, then steadied. Under Bramblegate Charter and Coalition Treaty Clause 9, I demand trial by truth before neutral human witnesses. Here, now, on Wade ground. Murmurs surged. A gray-bearded Orr judge pushed forward. Human. Chain of office clinking. Widow's right requires named accusation. Rosalind held up the satchel. I accuse Lady Vivian Silvermane of conspiracy to murder my mate Alden Duskwalker, attempted murder of me and my unborn heir, and unlawful war provocation through forged royal decree and bribed hunter action. Gasps rippled. All eyes snapped to Vivian. Vivian recovered fast, lifting her horn with a sad little shake of the head. Listen to her, distressed, manipulated. Then weigh me, Rosalind cut in. If I lie, strip my title here. The Orr judge looked to the crowd, then to the second and third charter elders who had muscled their way forward. One human woman with burn scars and one wolf quartermaster with white in his beard. Both nodded grimly. Trial by truth accepted, the judge said. Witness rail open. No rank immunity. Behind Rosalind, boots pounded on the stairs. Sebastian emerged from smoke and rain, bleeding from 3 new cuts, 2 hunters in tow with their own wrists zip-bound by their net cords. He dropped them at the rail and took position at Rosalind's side without touching her. A living wall she had chosen, not been forced behind. The crowd roared. Vivian's eyes went hard enough to chip stone. Fine, she said sweetly. Let us hear your little papers. Rosalind handed the satchel to the clerk. Pages were spread across the weighing table under lanterns. The Orr judge read first silently, then aloud. Private Commission Disbursement. Authorized by V. Silvermane. Execution Premium. Moon Mask Unit. The quartermaster leaned in, nostrils flaring at old blood traces embedded in one receipt. This seal wax is from East Court Formula, not Guildstock. A woman in the crowd shouted, Name the dead. The judge turned pages. Target code Birch Stag. Date corresponds to Alden Duskwalker's killing. Silence dropped like a blade. Sebastian stepped forward, drew a thin obsidian disc from inside his coat, a king's memory slate, pressed the contract pages against it, and fed power into the runes with a palm striped in drying blood. Light flared. Above the square, lines of script projected in pale gold across mist and smoke, huge enough for every bystander to read. Payment trails, seal imprints, names, Caro's office, Hunter Captain Joran Vale, Moon Mask subcontractor list, and one line repeated beside 3 separate kills. Witness elimination authorized, if widow present. A howl rose from somewhere back in the wolves. Human voices followed, angrier, louder. Vivian's composure cracked. Forgery, she snapped. Blackwood trickery. Rosalind pulled the wolfbone ring from her pocket, ripped moments earlier from the assassin's hand when she slammed the archive door, and held it high. Then call your guard to deny this. The Moon Mask assassin, half his coat burned, limped into the square at that exact moment with 2 militia on him and blood on his mouth. He saw the ring in her hand and blanched. Too late. He wore this at my wedding, Rosalind said. He wore it when Alden died. He was posted in your honor guard tonight. Vivian's gaze darted once, toward the brass lever box by her rail. Rosalind saw it. Of course she saw it. She had seen it on the roof. Before the hearing, while clerks spread papers and everyone watched the projected contracts, Rosalind had limped past that rail as if steadying herself and switched the lever's retaining pin with the red-marked decoy from the forge. It sat now, where it looked right, and held wrong. Vivian slammed her palm down on the lever. Hidden silver wire snares fired, not toward Rosalind, but backward with reversed tension. One wire whipped around Vivian's wrist and drove it hard into the witness rail, burying barbs through glove and flesh into oak. She screamed, shocked and furious, pinned by her own trap in full view of half the town. The crowd surged with a collective, savage inhale. Sebastian didn't move to shield Rosalind. He didn't need to. She stepped down from the weighbridge and crossed the slick planks until she stood directly in front of Vivian, close enough to smell perfume beneath panic. Vivian bared her teeth, pain bright in her eyes. "You were supposed to grieve quietly and vanish." Rosalind leaned in so every listening ear would catch her reply. "You mistook mourning for weakness." For a heartbeat, nothing moved except rain. Then the Ore judge struck the iron gavel on rail. "By charter authority and witnessed evidence, we find Vivian Silvermane culpable of conspiracy, fraudulent decree, and contracted murder. All titles suspended pending High Council confirmation." The burn-scarred elder added, voice carrying, "And by Bramblegate human law, attempted homicide during hearing, she goes in iron." Hunter Captain Joran Vale tried to edge backward into the crowd. Two miners grabbed him by both arms and dragged him to the rail while people shouted, "Read his signatures!" "Chain him too." Sebastian's projection shifted to the captain's marks on transport manifests and snare requisitions. Vale sagged. At the edge of the square, Lord Caro stood under a hood, face drained of color. When the projected ledger flared his office seal across the mist, he turned to run. Wolves from the town watch cut him off before he reached the lane. Lady Merowyn, arriving too late with a carriage guard, watched him shackled and said nothing as clerks took her signet for evidence. Vivian thrashed once against the wire, pinning her, and hissed at Sebastian, "You'll lose the throne for this." He met her stare like a winter cliff. "Better that than keep it your way." Guards stripped her jeweled clasp and council braid in the square, symbols of rank dropping into mud. Iron cuffs closed over her uninjured wrist. When they yanked the barbed wire free, she screamed again and tried to spit at Rosalind. The spit landed on her own torn sleeve. As they hauled her toward the jail wagon, the chant started near the forge hands and spread outward, rough and rising. "Rosa Lind! Rosa Lind!" She stood soaked and shaking on wade ground, while the town that had nearly sold her hours ago shouted her name like judgment and promise. Night deepened by the time quiet finally found them. Not in the guild hall, where clerks still copied confessions and judges argued jurisdiction. Not in the market, where people drank hard and louder than usual because history had turned in front of them. They walked beyond the last lamps, past the north sluice, and up an old quarry path silvered with mist, until Bramblegate's noise fell away behind pine and stone. The Moonstone Arch stood where the path met ridge, an ancient half-ruined gateway from before either wolves or humans claimed the valley, veined pale and faintly luminous in moonlight. Moss glowed like frost along its base. Rosalind stopped beneath it and let out a breath that shuddered all the way through her. Sebastian stayed a respectful step away. For a long moment they just looked at each other. Mud-spattered, blood-crusted, exhausted past sense. His shoulder bandage was fresh but already stained. Her palm wrap had loosened. Both of them were marked by survival. "The council will convene by dawn," he said quietly. "They'll push to formalize before rumor mutates again." "You mean they'll push to decide what I am now that I didn't die as planned?" His mouth tightened. "Not if I can help it." She laughed once, soft and incredulous. "You keep saying things like that, as if I'm surprised to have choices." He stepped closer by inches, giving her time to retreat if she wished. She didn't. "I need to ask you something," he said. Her pulse sped. The bond answered, warm and taut. "Rosalind Duskwalker," he said, voice gone rough at the edges. "As Alpha King, I ask consent to mark you and be marked before Witness Moon. Not for politics, not for council optics, for bond and protection freely chosen." The old power in his title hummed through the words, but his posture stayed open, hands at his sides, no demand in him but hope, held painfully still. He waited. "Yes," she whispered. His eyes closed briefly, relief and awe flickering across his face. He opened them again. As Wolf, he said, lower now, the word vibrating in her bones, I ask consent to claim and be claimed, to guard your life and our pups with my own. Yes rose faster this time. Yes. He swallowed hard, throat working. One more step, and now she could feel his heat in the cold air. As the male who loves you, he said, and the confession landed between them like a lit flame. I ask again. May I mark you, Rosalind? Her chest hurt with how much she felt. Grief and want, terror and trust, Alden's memory and Sebastian's living presence, not replacing but joining the shape of her. She reached up, touched the scar along his jaw with trembling fingers, and bared her throat deliberately. Yes. He made a broken sound and cradled the back of her neck, still giving her that final heartbeat to pull away. She leaned in. His teeth found the junction of her neck and shoulder, not rushed, not savage, deep, careful, reverent. Pain flashed white, sharp enough to arch her, and then heat crashed through it, molten and flooding. It poured from the bite down her spine, through her belly, along every nerve the bond had brushed but never sealed. She gasped his name into the hollow of his throat, as her wolf rose not in panic but in recognition, opening like a door long barred. Mine, the bond roared, not ownership as cage, but belonging as shelter. Yours, she answered on instinct, fierce and astonished. He released slowly, tongue pressing the wound closed with ritual gentleness. Marklight shimmered under her skin, then settled into a crescent heat over her pulse. Inside her, the pup, restless all day, went suddenly calm. One soft roll, then peaceful stillness like sleep. Sebastian trembled against her, forehead dropping to hers. Mate, he whispered, wrecked. Rosalind laughed wetly, tears she hadn't realized she was holding spilling hot in the cold night. Mate. Then she caught his hair in both hands and turned him. His breath hitched. Rosalind. My choice too, she said, and sank her teeth into the scarred line between his shoulder and neck. He cursed, half pain, half stunned delight, as blood welled copper bright on her tongue. The bite gave under her jaw with primal rightness, agony and pleasure braided tight. Power surged the other way this time, her grief, her stubbornness, her refusal to bow, her love not meek but wild, pouring into him through blood and bond. His knees almost buckled with the force of it, and then he laughed, rough and disbelieving, a sound she wanted to keep forever. When she drew back, his mark ignited under skin like moonfire beneath storm cloud. He touched it with shaking fingers. Gods. No cages, she breathed. No crowns before us, he answered. Together, forehead to forehead beneath the moonstone arch, they whispered, only chosen. They stood there a long time after, holding each other without urgency, feeling the bond settle from wildfire to steady burn. Not less intense, more inhabitable. His heartbeat and hers found shared cadence. Her wolf lay down beside his in that internal place where instincts speak truer than politics. For the first time since birch roots and blood, Rosalind felt something like safety that did not require surrendering herself to find it. Dawn came hard and clear over Bramblegate, smoke turning gold over mine stacks. The council chamber was too small for the crowd it held. Charter elders, wolf clan representatives, human guild delegates, border captains, clerks with ink-stained hands, and enough witnesses from the night hearing to drown any attempt at quiet revision. Vivienne sat shackled in the accused rail, pale and bandaged, flanked by 2 human marshals and 1 wolf warden. Joran Vale and the Moon Mask assassin waited in chains behind her. Caro occupied a separate bench under armed guard, his tailored coat replaced by prison gray. Mirewin, stripped of advisory sash, stood with other censured nobles under watch. Rosalind entered on her own feet, mark visible at her throat, cloak clasped over her belly with simple steel instead of jewels. Sebastian walked beside her, not ahead. The high clerk read the findings, testimonies followed, signatures were demanded and given with shaking hands. No one could pretend confusion now. Evidence had names, murder had invoices. When the penalties were put to vote, every charter hand rose. "Vivian Silvermane," intoned the presiding elder, "you are stripped of title, land privilege, and council standing. You are remanded to Bramblegate Human Court for conspiracy and murder, then to Interspecies Tribunal for cross-border killings." Vivian lifted her chin, venom intact even in defeat. "You think this she-wolf can hold what comes next?" Rosalind met her gaze without flinching. "Watch me." Marshals hauled Vivian out in iron. Next came governance, the messier war. Rosalind stood at the central table and unrolled a fresh document she had written before dawn with 3 clerks and 2 witnesses at her side. Her hand still ached from the altar cut. She signed anyway. "Trifold Pact," she said, voice carrying. Clause 1. Wolf clans retain territorial law within recognized borders, including den rights and succession customs. Clause 2. Bramblegate humans receive protected trade status under Crown Seal. No pack levy seizures, no retaliatory hunts. Clause 3. All interspecies crimes are tried by mixed tribunal. 1 human magistrate, 1 wolf elder, 1 neutral clerk. So no court can bury blood with rank. Murmurs turned to thoughtful silence. A human guildmaster raised a hand. "And enforcement?" Rosalind nodded to Sebastian. He stepped forward, placed his signet beside hers. "Crown Guard and Town Watch joint patrol charters within 10 days, any breach answered by both." The burn-scarred elder from last night grunted approval. Balanced teeth. The vote passed, not unanimous at first, then unanimous after 2 holdouts read Clause 3 twice and stopped pretending they could game it. Final motion: Regency. "Until the Duskwalker heir comes of age," declared the presiding elder, "Rosalind Duskwalker is hereby recognized as Moonshield Regent, vested with border authority and tribunal oversight. Sebastian Blackwood stands as Alpha King by counsel and by bonded right, without forced mating contract. No chains disguised as duty, no bride price politics. Chosen." The gavel fell. It was done. Outside, bells rang. Not alarm this time, but open market peals. People spilled into the square where yesterday had nearly killed her. The gray-braided widow from the broken stall pressed a wrapped loaf into Rosalind's hands and muttered, "For the little one, no charge." A miner touched 2 fingers to his brow in respect. Wolves from 3 clans bowed briefly, then straightened as equals. By noon, workers were already at the north gate replacing trapwire with treaty notices. At dusk, Rosalind walked to the Birch Memorial Ground above the river and oversaw the first watch change of the new guard she had ordered founded in Alden's name. The Stag Watch. Sworn to protect widows and heirs in transit regardless of pack rank. She placed Alden's knife on the cairn for 1 silent minute, then reclaimed it and slid it at her belt. "Still with me," she murmured. Sebastian stood back while she spoke to the dead, giving her that space without being asked. When she turned, he offered his hand, and she took it. That evening they stepped onto the council balcony together, Bramblegate spread below in lantern light and smoke. Her new mark warmed under her fingertips when she touched it. Her other hand rested over the child who shifted lazily, safe for now. Sebastian's shoulder brushed hers. No cage, no command. Presence. Rosalind looked out over humans and wolves, rebuilding a town that had almost become her grave, and chose again what she had chosen under Moonstone. Love without erasure, strength without possession, a future fought for in daylight. And this time, no one dragged her to it. She walked there herself.